Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you'll learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline. And on today's show, we'll be exploring the mind-body connection and how harnessing the wisdom of the body and the power of the mind can help us to heal.
Right. So, Jacqueline, you've been managing and working through a tremendous amount of pain in your body over the past year or two. And I know this has sent you down a path of exploration and understanding of the link between the body, the mind, and your surroundings. And I wonder if you're willing to share your experience with our listeners, who I'm sure many have experienced similar things.
I'm willing, but I'm kind of laughing between this show and last show. Everybody's going to get to know me really well. Yeah, absolutely. But well, I think to answer your question is over the past couple of years, I've been experiencing a tremendous amount of pain in my structure, so in my spine. But the truth is, this mind-body journey that you're talking about has been an exploration of mine for over 30 years. And, I think it all really began when my mom got sick when I was a kid, and she was presented with what Western medicine had to offer her. And she was grateful to receive it and started to really explore for herself what else was out there. And in so doing, exposed all of us to what else was out there. And, I can think of so many different places to sort of share what my experience around that was, but I think I'll choose just a few. And I will share that, from a background standpoint, where my interest around the mind and body led me was first into psychology, and then out of psychology and into the field of 5-element acupuncture and Chinese medicine, because I wanted to really understand the whole body and how it connected to the mind and the spirit. And then back again into psychology and various forms of energetic medicine. So I think what's relevant to share to begin with is, from the time that I was very young, my connection to my body was really strong. And for a lot of people, and you probably included, Chris, where your head would share something with you, for me, it was always my body. So one of my experiences is that from the time I was a little girl, I used to have issues with my throat. And issues meaning almost feeling like I was being choked, or feeling like I had a peach pit in my throat. And I know for you, our listeners, there's lots of people who experience that kind of block in the throat. But for me, it was really consistent over many, many years. And it was really aligned with being a people pleaser and not speaking my truth. And a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple of years ago, it's probably almost a decade ago, whatever was happening for me then, well, what was happening for me was I was going through a really hard time in my marriage and needing to leave. And I wasn't speaking what was true for me. And my throat blew up, so much so that I had a bulge in my neck that was visible to the naked eye. And I would walk around with scarves. And I went for all kinds of tests, only to be told there's nothing there. But even the doctors could see it. And so it just really spoke to the power of the body to communicate. And what it was energetic, and it was blocked. And I kind of want to take a step back there, because emotions, as I understand them and as I've studied them, are energy in motion. And so our bodies are in flow when we're feeling. But often we don't want to feel. Our feelings are too big, or they're too hard, or they're uncomfortable. And so we turn away from our experiences. And when we do that, those experiences take energy which wants to move, and energy stagnates and it gets stuck, and it can become pathology. And so for me, in my work, both on myself and then with the people that I work with, one of my biggest interests is in working with the body and the body's wisdom to communicate through sensation, and then with our emotions to be able to create a clear and easy flow of energy, so that that stuckness, which, energy stagnates and then becomes dis-ease or pathology, doesn't necessarily need to happen. Coming back to your original question, what I've also come to understand through my own research based on my experiences is that pain, for me, pain in my structure, like physical pain, radiating nerve pain, pain that a couple of years ago looked like a surgery booked to work on the structure of my neck, can be coming from different places than just structure. So in John Sarno's work, studies have shown that you can have two people with the very same MRI. And in that MRI, one person is debilitated and the other person actually has no pain. So while MRIs are significant in terms of what they're showing us, they're also not significant from the standpoint that whatever it is that's going on inside of us is going to determine whether or not that MRI shows up as discomfort, pain, surgery, whatever. So for me, a few years ago, I had horrible pain radiating down my arm coming from my neck. I remember being at brunch with a bunch of friends and tears rolling down my face. And I found out that I needed surgery. And I booked the surgery. It was that uncomfortable. And I ended up in a level 2 teacher training for Kundalini yoga. And one of the teachers is a man that I really, really respect, named Guru Dev. And I walked up to him and said, "Hey, this is what's going on for me. Can you help?" And his response was, "Well, you need to read this book. Do you know that you're carrying real trauma in your body?" And I remember sort of being taken aback and going, "Seriously, you're just going to give me a book to read?" And also, I was a trauma therapist at the time. I never even considered the fact that I had trauma in my body. But I read the book he suggested, and I did the work the book spoke to, which was all about how our bodies hold what our psyches can't. And so the trauma that was alive in my body, which I wasn't willing to look at yet, was actually being held in my structure. And as soon as I was able to actually look to it and work with it, that experience shifted completely, and I canceled the surgery, and the pain was gone for 2 years. And the last thing I'll share around this is that, as we spoke of in our last segment, I had a tremendous amount of fear that was released over the last couple of weeks. When that fear was released, the pain that I've been experiencing in my neck, which again has taken me down the route of MRIs and meeting with specialists and doing all of that, for 2 full days, it was gone completely.
Wow.
Which for me, if I listen to the wisdom of my body, says, your structure's holding what you're not processing. So how can you turn toward what's uncomfortable and actually begin to work with it rather than muting it and turning to specialists outside to tell you what they're going to do with it. Because as long as the emotion is still stuck there, it's just going to come back. So I hope that answers your question, and helps give you guys some agency around your bodies, and helps you to turn inward and actually ask what your body is trying to communicate rather than just turning it off. Now, you have a little bit of a different experience, my love. Over the last little while, or maybe even like almost a year at least, you've had virtually a pain-free body. And that hasn't always been so for you. Can you share what's been going on for you around that?
I can, and thanks for sharing your experience, because what I'm going to share, it's going to start so different, because as you talked about this intuition between the body and feelings and whatnot, I had like zero. In fact, if you could have negative, I had that. And so my story is going to start off in that aspect, and people out there might relate to this. So I'm no stranger to chronic pain, and the couple really intense episodes of it. And the first one started when I was in my early 20s. I woke up one night with just a searing headache. I've had migraines before this. I've had regular headaches, but this was something entirely different. It was like a migraine times 10. And so I was terrified. I thought it was a tumor. I was having an aneurysm. I had no idea. So, I did what I used to do. I got up and I went to the emergency room. And I got really lucky that night because I managed to run across an intern first of all, the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. But I ran into an intern whose sister suffered from something called cluster headache syndrome, which I had never heard of, and I'm guessing many of you have never heard of. But it turns out that's actually what I had. That was the diagnosis that fit all these symptoms I had. And what cluster headache syndrome is, it's an onset that's very rare. It generally shows up in men, and it starts often, and this is sort of a generalization, in the early 20s, and goes on until the 50s or 60s and just disappears. And it's hard to study because they show up in what are called clusters. The headache comes on, it intensifies for about 4 weeks, and then it de-intensifies for 2 weeks and goes away. They come 2 to 4 times a day, every day in that period. And they're completely debilitating. I would need to go into a dark room with no sound, and I couldn't sit still because the pain was so intense. I'd have to rock back and forth, or I'd have to rub my head, or I'd have to do something to take the pain away. And initially, there wasn't much we could do except some steroids and things like that really didn't help a lot. And fortunately, as time went on, some new medications came on the market, and there's a nasal spray I could take that would abort the headache sometimes. But for the most part, I just learned to live with it. It just became part of my life. I would have these episodes every year, or once in a while they'd skip a year, and I just have to push through it. That was it. So that's my first episode of chronic pain. The second, I showed up in my early 40s. Out of nowhere, there's no real catalyst for this. I started getting the symptoms of back pain. I never had it in my life. That referring pain down the leg, that sciatica pain, really intense pain in the hip, the back itself, and it progressed very quickly. And soon I couldn't lie in a bed properly. I couldn't sit. Driving was hard. Everything became impossible. And I started to get really scared because I was getting to this place right now. I'm in my early 40s. I've got young kids and doing all this stuff. I can't play with my kids anymore. I can't drive anymore. I can't do anything. And I just saw my life falling apart. And I immediately just went out to do what I knew how to do: seek help from these medical practitioners. So chiropractor, physiotherapist, medicine, sports doctors. And what I encountered was the chiropractor was sure it wasn't a disc issue. He could fix it. The physiotherapist was sure it was something to do with my piriformis. The chiropractor couldn't fix it, but they could. And the sports medicine doctor was none of those things. It's actually your nerve is spasming and needs an injection. And so I started doing all these things with these 3 different people, throwing everything I knew how to throw at it, and everything just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And again, I feel like I got really lucky because I went into this sports medicine doctor to get another injection that hadn't worked, but I was going to try it again. And they weren't there, but their assistant was. And their assistant looked at me and just said, "You know what? I think you need to go see a doctor." And so I went to my doctor that day. I saw my doctor, who immediately said, "I think you need to go to emergency right now and do not leave until you see a neurosurgeon. I think you have a disc issue." And sure enough, I did that, waited 18 hours in emergency, finally saw the neurosurgeon, who looked at me, did all these tests and said, "Okay, your back's in really bad shape. You have a herniated disc. My next surgery is in 6 months. That's the next booking, but I'm going to take you next week because you're in that bad shape." And so my experience there was I had this surgery and I had this instant relief of that chronic pain. And if you've ever been in chronic pain and you've had that type of relief, it's all of a sudden your life changes. Like, oh my God, I'm out of this thing. And so it worked for a little bit, but then that pain started coming back a little more mildly. And again, life became a bit of a struggle with that chronic pain. I went back, had a second surgery about 4 years later, again, helped alleviate that pain, but never really pain free. It's always sort of something going on with my back. So I'm dealing with the cluster headaches and the back and various other things. So that's sort of my story of that chronic pain in the past.
Except that, beginning 2020, 2021, your approach to your body shifted dramatically. And it feels like you went sort of the route of, normal medical intervention up until then. But then something else happened. And I've watched it and it's profound. And I think really relevant for people that are dealing with chronic pain. So if you will, I'd love for you to share what's changed.
Yeah, I will. And interesting, before 2020, 2021, I would have heard what you said at the start of this episode, and I would have just discounted. Oh, that's woo-woo stuff. That's nonsense.
Fluffy.
Fluffy. I know what to do. But I would say actually the real shift of thinking about the mind-body connection for me happened at the start of 2020 during my first year of getting sober. I had come to this dead stop of using any outside substances to manage my emotional pain, my mental pain, or my spiritual pain. If I'm honest, what happened? So no alcohol, no drugs. I even eliminated pharmaceuticals for the most part. I got off social media. I cut out Netflix. I started listening to different types of music. I removed excessive exercise that I was used to coping. Get rid of porn, whatever it was, anything that I would associate with addictive behavior. I said, I'm going to get rid of this because I'm trying to make a change here. And what I started to understand was that this emotional pain was asking me to explore something that was hidden in my psyche or my subconscious, whether it was a trauma or a memory I'd suppressed. It was something that was wanting to be processed and be let go of. And so I realized that all these activities I was pursuing were simply dealing with the symptoms. And when I removed them, I needed to face what was inside of me. I mean, I was in this place where I really had no choice but to do that because I was trying to make such a major change in my life. And I'm going to be honest with everybody, it is really hard work. But I started having this transformation. And what I mean by that is all the pain began to slowly dissolve, but permanently dissolve. And this was not an overnight thing, but it became just become a daily practice. And I have to say, look at I'll call it my emotional sobriety now compared to my entire life. And I'm a super serene guy, and I was not a serene guy before.
And I've witnessed the transformation as I've watched you move through this. And I will say, I curse you sometimes because I've given up all of my coping mechanisms also. And my pain hasn't dissipated to the same level that yours has, which is one of these, it's a reminder that healing is something that happens over time. And it's a reminder that as we peel one layer of the onion, there are more layers. And I'll shift that because I heard from somebody that rather than speaking to the idea of peeling layers of the onion, we peel layers of an artichoke. And I say that because when we peel layers of the onion, all that happens is we cry because the onion makes us cry. But when we peel layers of the artichoke, what we come to is the heart of it all. And the truth is that as we release all of our distractions, slowly but surely, we let go of eating the bag of chips at night. We let go of turning to a drink to calm us down. We let go of all the busyness that might look good, but actually gets in the way. What we come to is a place where we're actually turning toward ourselves and the very essence of what's wanting to be known within us. And as we turn towards that, the level of intimacy that we often seek outside is something that we meet inside. And it becomes so profound that the relationship of a lifetime begins and the journey of a lifetime begins. And it's one where you are walking with you. So, as I normally do, I've brought this into the realm of the psychological and the emotional. And I think there's huge relevance in what you have to share about how you used your mind in the experience of the physical, especially over the last couple of years, and share that with our audience because it's been pretty profound to witness. I'm going to turn it over to you now, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. And I will bring it back to the experiential in this story. It's end of 2021, and I'm living on Bowen Island and sort of just going about my normal exercise routines, things like that. Nothing specifically different. And I wake up one morning and I have this aching in my shoulder. And I don't think a lot of it, but about 24 hours later, it's turned into like a 9 out of 10 shoulder pain. I'm someone who has suffered from cluster headaches and I've had back pain. I know what pain is. And it was something different. And to give you a picture of it, I could only sit one way in a chair without pain, and going up and going to the bathroom like is an ordeal. I think honestly I had the same shirt on for 2 weeks because it was so painful to try to take it off. It was pretty horrific. And I think you saw part of that.
I saw most of it, and yeah, it was awful to watch. And being on Bowen, you had access to almost no services. And I felt really compelled to get into action to try and get you the resources that you needed to try and figure out what was going on. But I felt really helpless watching you.
Well, you were very helpful, and I was grateful for that because if you don't know this, Jacqueline's like a wizard with the medical system and marshaling resources. And within a week and a half, even less, I think, I had a private MRI, not just one, but two of them, one for my shoulder and one for my neck. And then very quickly was in to see a shoulder and neck specialist. And the prognosis was, he looked at my MRI and said, it appears that you dislocated your shoulder sometime in the past. It relocated itself, but now something's happened that's, caused it to readjust. And there's only one option for this. This requires surgery. That's it. There's no other option. Really bad news. It's COVID. It's a 3-year waiting list in the Canadian medical system for shoulders. But I got some good news. We can give you an injection that'll take the pain away. I'm like, perfect. 1-year waiting list because of COVID. Good luck. Well, so clearly that's not an option. I could not be in this kind of pain like that. And so here comes that gift of desperation that keeps showing up in my life. In my own spiritual journey, I'd come across the work of a fellow named Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I'm not going to go fully into his story, but let's put it this way. He's explored healing the body with the mind because he healed his own catastrophic back injury through meditating the actual procedure to fix your back. Listen, I thought it was interesting. He has a movie called Hero, but I sort of thought it was a little bit woo-woo at the time. But what got me to grab onto that was also an experience I had in the MRI machine before seeing this doctor in this episode. I got to the MRI and I was asked to lay down and put my neck flat. And I said, that's like a 13 out of 10 pain. I can't do that. I can't hold that position. And the technician basically said, listen, if you either do that or you can't have an MRI. And I needed this MRI. So I bit down and I did it. And my arm was twitching and shaking because the pain referring down it was so intense. And I remember just telling myself to just start breathing through it, use the breath. And I fell asleep 10 minutes later. I woke up after that MRI with zero pain in my shoulder, thinking it was cured. Now, it all came rushing back 10 minutes later, but that was the first indication that there's something about this connection between my mind and my pain that I had some control over. So my process for fixing the shoulder looked like this. Following Joe Dispenza's technique, I took a look at a picture of what a healthy shoulder looked like. I looked at my MRI. I set the intention to have my shoulder looking like this. And then for 1 hour a day, I meditated on that healthy shoulder. And this idea, I kept sending this blue healing light into my shoulder. And that was a construct I made up on my own. And right before my eyes, 10 days later, the pain's starting to fall rapidly. 30 days later, I'm pain-free. 3 months later, I'm lifting weights. And 1 year later, I got a phone call. It was the hospital telling me I'm ready for my injection in my shoulder. I had forgot I ever had a shoulder injury. And my shoulder is the best it's been in my entire life. No surgery.
And I can attest to the truth and all of that, but I want to just reiterate that two things. One is that took a tremendous amount of commitment and discipline to show up for yourself every day. And so, I think one of the things that's really important for us to own is that we can do a hell of a lot with our minds, but there's a tremendous amount of personal responsibility that's required in order to get us there. It's not like taking a pill. You actually have to do the work. The other is that I watched the 13 or 10 or 12 out of 10 pain that you were in. And what really struck me in the process was your capacity and willingness to surrender to the pain. Most often, when we experience that level of pain, or actually when we experience a 2 out of 10 of discomfort, we are not willing to be with it. We want to fight it, or we turn away from it. And it reminds me a little bit of the riptide analogy, right? Like, if a riptide comes and grabs us, I can fight it. I don't want to get pulled out by the riptide. But by my fighting it, all of my energy is going into fighting what is. And in the process, I'm going to get yanked under, and I'm probably going to die and drown from the riptide. But if instead I meet the riptide with surrender, and I allow it to pull me, and I conserve my energy for what happens after, which is I get to swim back, or I conserve my energy and I can use that energy to heal, then I'm in flow. I watched you do a very similar thing, but even maybe more profound, about a year later with your cluster headaches. Do you think that you'll share that with these guys too?
Yeah, that's I got shivers on this one, because this is where the penny dropped for me in all of this. Because the first one, maybe that was just lucky, maybe that was random, but two of them similarly, there was more to it. So I thought those cluster headaches that I talked about stopped when I turned 49, and I hadn't had any for about 3.5 years. And I think I associated the fact I live a very, very clean, very healthy life, lots of meditation. That did it. That got rid of them. But sure enough, this January of this year, wake up in the middle of the night, boom, there's cluster headache number 1. And that's always has been followed by 6 weeks of going through this, the hurt locker. And I remember getting up and getting in the bathroom, opening the drawer where I keep the medication for cluster headaches in case they come back, right? Even 3.5 years later, these things are so awful. I've kept this medication sitting there. And I remember looking at it in that moment, and I'm just thinking, even knowing that this nasal spray could probably take away the pain right now, I just said, that's not how I'm choosing to live my life anymore. And I'm going to try to find a different way through this thing. And I sat down and I just decided I'm just going to be with this pain. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to let this pain flow through me, and I'm just going to breathe into it. And what I'm going to add to that is a similar technique. I'm going to visualize I have a healthy brain. Blood vessels are expanding or not contracting. It's healthy and it's full of blue healing light. And first night, painful. Second night, it got a little more painful. But the third night, that pain actually started to reside. And 1 week later, they were gone. And if you suffer from these headaches, you'll understand how profound that is. Never before have this series of headaches left earlier than 5 weeks, and without crescending at this unbelievable pain level. And here they were gone 7 weeks later. No medication, no drugs, no doctors, just meditating and surrendering.
Yeah, which really speaks to the power of it really speaks to the power of our mind. Or the power of your mind and the possibility that exists for us when we really work to train the mind. I'd love to come back to the body a little bit, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to take us back to basics in terms of working with the wisdom of the body. So I was really struck by some of Brené Brown's work around trust. And she wasn't speaking to the body at all. She was speaking to trust between people. But what she spoke was that trust is built in small increments over time. Through our actions, we build trust with each other, but that it can be taken away in one fell swoop, which is true, right? There's a betrayal, something happens, and all of a sudden you had spent 20 years building trust and it's gone. Well, I'd like to look at the body in that realm, because our bodies are communicating with us all the time, and they have since we were born. When we're little, we're hungry, we cry, we get fed. We're wet, our diapers are wet, we cry, we get changed. We listen to our bodies because it's the only thing that we know how to do. It's almost reflexive at that point, and our needs get met. But as we get older, we start turning our attention outward. We start seeing other people as experts. We listen to what the TV tells us we're supposed to feel. We listen to what doctors tell us is happening. We listen to what our teachers say, our peers, our friends, our family. And all of a sudden, this connection that I have with my own body begins to change. My body says, I'm tired. I drink coffee. My body says, I'm hurting, and I take a pill. My body says, I feel sad, and I go to the doctor and I get medicated. My body communicates stress, and I drink or I eat bad food. And the truth is that it's inherent within us. We're pre-programmed to move towards pleasure and away from pain. But in so doing, I'm telling my body over and over and over again that its messages are irrelevant. And I begin to build a negative feedback loop with my own body, which leaves me in a place that actually, it's a dangerous place, because the communication system that is alive and well for me is being ignored, and in so doing leads me to a place where dis-ease and pathology becomes much more likely.
An analogy that popped in my head as you were talking there is it's like I'm driving my car and the check engine light comes on in it. And so I take it to the dealership, and I have them fix it by turning the check engine light off. It doesn't fix the car. They just turn the symptom on as saying what was wrong with the car. Does that fit with what you're saying?
It's exactly what I'm saying, because the body communicates with sensation, and it communicates with sensation to get our attention. And when it doesn't get our attention, it communicates often with pain, because pain gets our attention. It's the wisdom of the body is so profound, but the way in which our society works, we are taught over and over again how to distract or mute discomfort instead of how to meet it and honor its messages.
You know, and when I think of what you're talking about, what shows up to me is from a mind body connection standpoint is the subconscious mind we have is 85 or 90% of our mind, and the conscious part of it, the whereabout of our executive function, is maybe 10%. And that subconscious mind has very few tools to communicate directly to our executive function. And that's actually not a bad thing. It's a good thing because, that subconscious part of our mind is managing our respiratory system, our circulatory system, our lymphatic system. It's stabilizing us. It's watching our external environment. If it was to send that all information to our thinking mind, we'd be totally overwhelmed and wouldn't be able to function. So it's cut off for a reason. But, and here's the big question. What if its main way to alert us that something needs to change, and keeping in mind the subconscious mind knows an awful lot about what's going on with us, is through symptoms. And one of those symptoms is pain, and we're just ignoring it.
Yeah, well, I think that's right on. But, symptoms are calling our attention to something. But because we work in our world right now much more with the seen than the unseen, we look at symptoms and we try to fix symptoms instead of looking at symptoms and working to get back to the root cause of disease. And, in many spiritual systems right now, the time that we're in is called the Aquarian Age. And the Aquarian Age is an age where we are being really invited to turn inward and really wake up our intuition and our wisdom and our knowing, and actually move our attention away from all of the outside information that's sort of being pounded at us all the time. Because with all the information available to us, I'll go back to what you had spoken about, the physio, the chiro, and the doctor, or the physio, the chiro, and what was the other person?
Sports medicine professional.
Okay, the sports medicine professional, is all of them are giving you information. They're all giving you different information. And each one of those may be of value. But the person who has the capacity to know what's good for them and what's not is being ignored. And we're being asked right now to turn back inside and grow that part of us that knows and build our intuition.
And so, when we talk about this, it's not surprising to me that medical intervention is the third largest cause of death in the US, where there's good statistics. And we kind of witness a crazy amount of adults are on some type of form of medication or antidepressants. And there's this trend towards dealing with all these psychological issues through medical intervention. And to me, it feels like this disaster is unfolding. And like we've completely stopped trying to listen to our bodies. And when our bodies are trying to communicate to us, we're just working to turn the signal off. So it almost sounds like we're going the opposite way that you talked about.
Yeah. I'd like to just clarify something with you, because for me, when I hear that, it sounds a little bit like you're throwing Western medicine under the bus. And I know that's not true. But I think it's important to clarify that a little bit before we keep going.
Thank you for pointing that out. I do not want to come across that way, because I don't believe that. Western medical technology is incredible. I mean, we live longer now than ever. We've cured many diseases that used to wipe out humanity. There's lots of incredible interventions. I think what I'm saying, and I think what you're saying too, is that there's also another way, and it isn't better and it isn't worse, but it's just different. And I would go so far as to say it's completely complementary and it can work beautifully in conjunction with Western medicine, but it requires flexibility and mindedness on the part of everyone involved.
Well, yeah, and I love that you use the word complementary instead of alternative, because often people will use the word alternative and it feels kind of, I don't know, it does something to me and my body. I think that leveraging Western medicine and what it's good at, and then working with different complementary medicine to help support it, is our only way to remember what it means to be healthy and to heal. Because our bodies inherently work toward balance. We are programmed to come back to homeostasis. Our bodies know how to return to health, given the proper conditions. And so, for me, in my experience, I would suggest that Western medicine has incredible gifts to offer, but we rely on it way too much. In the work that I do, what I've come to really understand is so much of what shows up as physical symptoms is related to emotional baggage, which we have not processed through our body. Our issues, emotional issues, are alive and well in our tissues. And we need to work with different forms of complementary medicines, technologies, systems to remind our bodies how to clear the blockages that are alive within our channels and return us back to flow. And, you know, for me, some of those practices, which I'd love to share more about, include breath work, include Kundalini yoga, it includes emotional release work. And I live very much in this body. I live very much connected to my emotions, and I use my body to heal. I use my body to heal my mind. But that's because the gift I've been given in this lifetime is really strong body awareness. You, on the other hand, use meditation to heal yourself. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about that with our audience.
Yeah, and I will, but I want to put a pin in that talk, the bottom up practical experience of things we can do. I think that's a whole episode. So I'm going to pin in that. We're going to come back to that, all the various things you can share.
Yeah.
Western medicine can't explain how our minds can heal us, at least not in a way that makes any sense to me. And that's just my personal view. But this is a profound area of interest to me, obviously, because I've used my mind to heal me in a couple instances. So this is going to be really different, right? Really different. I'm going to ask you to suspend your beliefs for a moment. I want you to go through an exercise of wanting to believe what I say is true, just for 5 minutes, and then you can go back and judge it. I'm working towards my designation in a field called quantum morphogenetic science. And you can just let that term go. It doesn't matter. And there's an explanation within this that resonates with me about why this mind-body connection works. Consciousness is the key to everything in our creation, including our bodies. And here's how this works at a very high level. Like at a very high level. The source, or all one unified consciousness, seeking to experience itself by dividing itself into smaller nodes of consciousness. And that's what creation is. It's source breathing in to contracting and exhaling, breathing out into all creation. On each exhale, as it goes out into these smaller nodes of consciousness, it collects information from that manifestation, as it comes back in, it uses that information on its next breath out of expansion, creation, destruction, in an ever repleting circle. But what that means is that source is experiencing itself through a co-arising manifestation creation process. That's what the creation is. And each time it expands, it collects a little bit more new information from consciousness that comes back in, that then leads to the next iteration. So what does it mean at any kind of a practical level? Because that's way out there. What it means is what we think, both consciously and subconsciously, at an individual and collective level, drives the next iteration of creation. And these iterations I'm talking about are happening a zillion times a second. It's beyond speeds we understand. It's beyond the comprehension of our mind, because we're just a small part of this overall creation. So our thoughts, intention, and focus matter incredibly. They're very significant.
Okay. So you said you were going to make that practical, but for us dodo birds over here, me included, what are you actually saying?
Right. Fair enough. Okay. If I really want to, I'm going to simplify it. Maybe I'll use an analogy. I'm saying that a shift in our consciousness is what impacts our external environment. It's not the other way around.
So what you're saying is that a shift in the way we think will create a shift in our outer environment.
Correct. On an individual and collective level. And there are all these metaphysical messages that relate to this if we start thinking in these terms in all the spiritual stories. And just using the most well-known example of Jesus, we could think of, through this lens, the miracles that Jesus was performing was just change in the next iteration of creation based on a change in consciousness. And as an elevated, enlightened master of consciousness, he had the ability to make that change. And that ultimately, at a really simplified level, that's what prayer and meditation is. It's trying to shift our own consciousness internally to affect something in the outside world. And prayer and meditation shows up in every single spiritual system without fail.
So how do we take that wisdom and actually make it practical for our listeners? So prayer, meditation, those are words that everybody knows. What does that actually mean? What are you encouraging our listeners to do based on your study of the morphogenetic field and your understanding of consciousness?
Yeah. And as a sort of top-down, conscience-driven guy, my answer is always this: meditation, meditation, meditation. I believe meditations it's the proverbial free lunch. It doesn't cost anything. Anyone can do it. There's absolutely zero side effects, and it can be done absolutely anywhere. And there's 1,000 different ways to do it. You can always find one that's comfortable. I believe all of this healing, from my perspective, is about our consciousness. And Ken Wilber is someone who's done a tremendous amount of work on meditation, consciousness, and he also does it from a very scientific, empirical standpoint. And in the context of consciousness, they looked at a whole bunch of different ways that can potentially affect consciousness: meditation, talk therapy, pharmaceutical drugs, breath work, all these other things. And they found the only statistically significant change in consciousness occurred through meditation. But meditation for 20 minutes a day for 4 years straight would lead to a permanent and shift in consciousness in the people that did it.
That brings us back to the conversation that we were having earlier about the importance of discipline and commitment, and the significance of showing up for ourselves on a daily basis. In the same way that, when I spoke to this idea of trust and the body, it looks like not overriding the body's messages, but listening and responding. So when I'm thirsty, I drink. When I'm tired, I sleep. And I begin to entrain a different loop that says, I'm here and I'm responding. Or I'm here and I am working with my mind to train it to become a gift rather than a curse, but it requires discipline. Now, I do want to share that as somebody who's been studying meditation and has worked with meditation for over 20 years, there are different forms of meditation, and meditation as it exists overall tends to look like sitting down, getting still, being quiet, following your breath. And I will tell you that for somebody like Chris, that works beautifully. For somebody like me, it really didn't. And it took a lot of exploring to find meditation that did work for me. And for me, in a lot of ways, that included movement. So you can meditate through dance. You can meditate through mantra. You can meditate walking. There's all different schools of meditation. So if it's something that you're wanting to learn more about and you do a search, don't just search meditation. Search meditation in alignment with something that's actually significant or important to you, so it's something that you can commit to. I would love, again, just to come back to the body in terms of giving a few tools to our audience in terms of how to begin to work with the body if the body's not something that you're used to listening to or honoring. And I think I'm going to begin by sharing a tool that a teacher of mine shared with me that has lasted with me for a very long time. His name is Michael Talbot Kelly, and he's a fabulous psychotherapist in Vancouver. But he's so much more than that. And he introduced a concept, which I don't think was his either, to me, called the 4 A's. And it's the I see you principle. And so if you were to imagine a pyramid, the base of the pyramid is acknowledgement. And so it's taking a moment to acknowledge what's showing up in the body. For example, my heart's racing and naming it, or experiencing the feeling of sadness and naming I feel sad, or taking a moment and acknowledging that I feel really angry right now and just naming it. The second is attention. So it's acknowledging the feeling or the experience and then taking a moment, and maybe it's putting my hands on my heart or my gut or my head, and actually just taking a moment to attend to what's showing up. The third one on that level is affection. So it's meeting my body with kindness in that moment. Instead of I feel sad and I don't want to feel sad, I want to be happy. Actually taking a moment to meet sadness with affection. Because the truth is, I am sad right now. And if I were a little baby, I wouldn't look at a little baby who was crying and scream, stop crying. I would pick the little baby up in my arms and hold it tenderly. Why would I meet myself in any different way other than to shame myself? The last one is acceptance, which is, can I actually turn toward and accept what is in this moment? The riptide's got me. Rather than fighting it, can I surrender to the moment and actually allow? Because in so doing, not only do I conserve my energy, but I'm meeting what is. Michael Brown, in his work in the presence process, repeats a mantra in breath work that he uses. And the mantra is, I am here now in this. I'm meeting myself as I am in this moment. I'm turning toward rather than against. And in so doing, I'm meeting myself with kindness and self-compassion. You know, there's this beautiful saying that comes from a book that I read many years ago called The Forgotten Body. And the words are, and I said to my body, I want to be your friend. And she took a deep breath and said, I've been waiting my whole life for this. That stands out to me really strongly as the essence of so much of what we've been talking about. And I'm really looking forward to having more conversations about the mind-body connection as we move forward, because there's lots more that we can share.
Well, that thank you for sharing that on the body, because and the listeners can get this sense about how different we are and how we approach these things. And it's coming from our own experience as well as our own, natural gifts and talents of how we relate to things.
Yeah.
But I love these conversations too, because Jacqueline comes at it so different from me. She's my greatest teacher. My greatest learnings come from talking to people that experience reality and their bodies different than me. And so, even in this conversation, it's like it's been so enlightening for me, and I hope for our listeners too. I just found this approach of trying to manage my consciousness and being extremely specific about what I think and where my intention is focused and where my thoughts are placed as something that leads to the healing of the body, but also just leads to me having a better life. I bet when you combine top down work and bottom up work, like we do, you get to a pretty good place.
Yeah, we create magic. And I can't let this podcast end without saying that, well, I'll say ditto, because what you're able to teach me about working with the power of mind is something that is not natural for me, but is giving me the capacity to become more and more powerful in how I approach my day to day. And more importantly, more and more peaceful and at ease within myself. So with that, we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.